Okay, did you start it?
Yes.
You were ready, baby.
Okay, great. So we're just going to carry over from last class where we were talking about organizational structure. And today we're going to be able to apply some of our learning about the different kinds of organizational structures. And we're going to try out and see what is the best organizational structure under various scenarios. Do you remember from last class what organizational structure is?
Yeah, it's a hierarchy of an organization with direct reporting up, sort of like a triangle sometimes, reporting straight up.
Yeah, that's right. That's what we talked about last class. It's the hierarchy of pretty much boxes and who reports to who and eventually who reports up to the president. So as I said, we're going to apply things today, and I've got a Dilbert comic for you. Do you like Dilbert?
Love Dilbert.
Okay, well you can enjoy reading that comic. It's a funny one.
Very funny.
Huh?
Yeah. A bunch of liars in here. Very good. Very good.
Yeah, so basically it just talks about the different divisions in an organization, and Dilbert's calling them all liars. Hopefully the organizations we all work for aren't full of liars. But anyway, do you have a sense of, like, we're going to talk about organizational structures more, but why do you think it's important as a entry-level employee or a new employee to understand how a company is organized or what the organizational structure is?
Well, I think it's important for them because they can then get engaged, understand what their roles, responsibilities are, and then how to move up the chart in terms of getting promoted through that organization.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's really important for people to understand in terms of promotions and what's important in terms of what divisions or functions are important for the company as a whole. So I think that's spot on. Last time we talked about the various types of organizational structures, and maybe we could just review them. And then, as I said, we're going to go in and apply the knowledge to think about the best organizational structure under different scenarios. We talked about 4 structures: the functional structure, the divisional geographic area structure, the divisional product structure, and the matrix structure. The matrix structure, just given the time, we won't focus on today. But maybe we could just talk about the other 3. So the functional structure, do you remember what that structure was, or what would highlight for you of that structure?
No, it's just a bunch of different functional roles like accounting or finance, sales, marketing, and they're reporting into a president.
Okay, that's great. That's the functional structure. And what's the divisional geographic area structure? How would you define that?
So divisional area, you'd still have one president, but you may break it out by divisions. Divisions can be in, let's say, different countries or different regions, and those individuals would have their own people reporting into them, and then they would report to the president. Okay,
so it's divided by geographic area, like you said,
yeah.
Either North America, South America, Asia, or it could be, country specific if it's a small company and you don't have many countries.
Right.
And then lastly, the divisional product structure.
Yeah, it's the same way. Instead of now we're talking geography, now we're talking about products. So you just think about it from a product, everybody having a different product A, product B, product C, product D. There's one person responsible for those, and they're reporting into a president.
Okay, that's great. So those are the kinds of structures that are possible in the little scenario or exercise that we're going to have, and we're going to try it. So let me start it. This is scenario 1, and what I'd like you to do is just take a piece of paper and just write at the top of it, President, with a box around it. You can be the president.
Fantastic.
I know.
Yeah,
and so I'm just looking for the very first line of the organizational chart that you would draw if you were the president. So let me give you the scenario. Determined never to shovel snow again, you are establishing a new resort business on a small Caribbean island. Sketch and name the organizational structure you would put in place for the first year the resort is under construction. Why did you choose this structure?
Okay, so I would go functional structure with, let's say, 3 different functional roles. So 3 more buckets. One would be the finance guy. One would be the project management, which is responsible for construction. And maybe the third one's the sales and marketing person. So 3 people all reporting into the president, each with their own roles and responsibilities.
And why did you choose the functional structure?
Because you had the scenarios that the first year, it's simple to use, it's one location. And there's 3 direct reports, so it's quite easy for the president to manage that way from a profit and loss perspective.
Okay, that's great. So I think that's a very credible way to build up a resort, and you'd have the key functions, you've picked them off really well. I wanted you to sort of step back from just the resort and think about the functional structure and the advantages and disadvantages of using a functional structure. So looking at, finance, project management, and sales and marketing, can you think of some advantages and disadvantages of that structure broadly?
So just, again, those individual finance, project, sales, marketing, they are very clear on their roles and responsibilities and what they have to perform.
Yep.
So you got great depth there. You got simplicity that your 3 direct reports reporting into the one president who's responsible for the overall business. So it's easy to align, it's easy to coordinate, and it's easy to, because they're responsible for different areas, the conversations are usually pretty straightforward. Disadvantages, you're sometimes going to have disadvantages between sales, marketing's interest versus finance and that type of communication.
So yeah, I think you've hit a lot of the advantages and disadvantages. The only other thing I would add is that because these functions are only focused on their functional areas, the profit responsibility, and I know there's no profit in the first year for this resort probably,
Yep.
but the profit responsibility in a functional structure typically only rests with the CEO or the president, and so that puts more pressure on them. There aren't products or areas down the line that are thinking about the profit.
Right.
But coordination often across functions is difficult, and you pointed that out as one of the disadvantages. Okay, let me go to scenario number 2. It's now 7 years later. Your resort has been wildly successful. Club Ed owns 2 resorts in the Caribbean, 2 in Mexico, and 1 in South Pacific. The company operates a cruise ship that sails through the Caribbean. Sketch and name the organizational structure and explain why. So again, can you put president up there? And then sketch out the organizational structure you think would be most appropriate.
Okay, so this time I'm going to go with a geographic type of organization into 3 areas. Cruise here. So we're going to have the Mexico region, we're going to have the Caribbean, and we're going to have the cruise that's its own a division as well. And what you're going to
There's also the South Pacific. There's a resort there.
Oh, okay, maybe that's Caribbean. Did I put that?
No, there's 2 resorts in the Caribbean, 2 in Mexico, and 1 in South Pacific.
And 1 in South Pacific, okay. Alright, so in each of them, we're doing geographic here, so we're just going to have someone who's either a general manager, we'll use that title, for each of those different regions, or the cruise, and consider the cruise as a region as well, because it's very different than the other 3. And we're going to have them reporting into the president here. So the president again is responsible for the P&L. Each of them will have responsibility for their own little unique geography, so they actually have responsibility for their own profit and loss. It's like a little profit center, and it should be fairly straightforward.
Okay, that's great. So I actually think the divisional area structure makes a lot of sense for this organization as it stands today. Again, broadening it in terms of your thoughts on the advantages. Can you see any advantages and disadvantages broadly of the geographic area structure?
Yeah, so when you go by geographic, so you take your Mexico guy or woman or whoever, there now you can engage them because they're responsible for the P&L essentially of that region. They've got depth of that region, they understand that region, they work on their own sales and marketing. So that's a huge advantage, right? Could be different than the South Pacific. So you got expertise in each one. They're actually, you can see the accountability on each one. So those are major advantages, and then the president overseeing the overall vision. The negativity or the negative disadvantages on this thing is that sometimes when you're dealing with the president and you're trying to get everybody together, your communication can be an issue. Fighting for resources and dollars is always an issue. And so those become some of the disadvantages of operating.
Yeah, no, I think you hit on a lot of them. Another one that I would add in terms of the disadvantage is that you might have duplication of functions and even facilities. Obviously this is a resort, and so you need duplicate resorts. But there are other divisional area structures where you might have manufacturing plants everywhere rather than a global sort of sense of manufacturing. So you might have duplicative functions or facilities that you don't have as many economies of scale globally, but you might have regional economies of scale in this kind of structure. Okay, great. So let me do the last scenario. And you'll be happy to know that you've been wildly successful as the president of Club Ed. It's 10 years later. The club has 112 resorts and 3 cruise ships in North, Central, and South America. There's also an active merchandise division, which is 15% of sales, with Club Ed products sold at the properties and online. Can you also now think about the organizational chart you would use for this? So again, put president at the top of the page, and then how would you organize it?
Probably a little bit different. So we start with, well, you start with the previous one. We're going to go somewhat regional a little bit, North, Central, and South America. You may have general managers looking at those three things, but above that, you may also have around the head office, around the president is, for example, finance, centrally controlled. So you would, it's a matrix type of organization broken out, so which is a combination of both functional and geographic here. So you, in, what do we call it, the north piece, you may have the general manager or the president running the north region, who would have, for example, a finance person. So that finance person is reporting into the North Central, but also would report directly to the finance at head office. So that's what we mean by matrix, and you'd have that in every one of those regions, depending on how you split it up. The merchandising division could probably be, rather than specific to any region, you may find that at reporting directly into the president, just like you have that EVP of finance reporting directly into the president. So it's a bit of a matrix organization.
Okay, great. Well, we didn't go through matrix, so I said it was one we talked about last time. So I'm glad you brought it up. But I think the thing with organizational structure is there's no one right answer, and I think the structure which you've decided on, which is a geographic area structure, and then somewhat having some of the functions centralized, which you're calling a matrix size structure. Just so you know, often you'll have head office functions centralized. So finance, HR, IT will be centralized, and that doesn't mean that it's a matrix structure. It's just the way that it's efficient for a company to run, to centralize at the head office. So really, I think what you're describing here is you would stick with the geographic area structure with this.
Yeah.
You would go, and maybe you would go North, Central, and South America.
Right.
There's another, and I think that's a very credible structure, and the advantages and the disadvantages would be the same. There's another way to think about this, and it's because you have now a resort division, and a cruise ship division, and a merchandise division. So can you see how you could actually arrange it? Again, not saying it's the right answer, but a different answer. Where you'd say, you know what, resorts, cruise ships, and merchandise or online are very different products, and you can actually arrange this in a product division. So you could have the president at the top, you could have online and merchandise sales, you could have cruise ships, and you have resorts. And then below the resorts, you're right, you could then go into your area. But that's a different way of organizing it as well.
Okay.
And you know what, the answer in terms of which one you would pick is based on what's more important. Are cruise ships and merchandise and resorts different enough that they should be their own separate divisions? Or actually, it's the regions that are different enough, and the regions really drive things, and you have to decide that.
Right.
Because really, with structure, strategy's first, and then based on the strategy, you pick your structure.
Right.
So anyway, I know we didn't go into the product structure, but if you had a product structure, for example, the merchandise, online, cruise ships, and resorts, which is a product structure, there are advantages and disadvantages to that as well. So a key advantage to that would be that each of the product groups are able to focus on the profitability of that product area, and it helps managers in terms of being experienced. There'll be amazing cruise product managers, merchandise product managers, so they have sort of great career paths in their products.
Yeah.
Can you think of any disadvantages in the product structure? Did anything jump out at you if you had resorts, cruise?